So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. And this translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshua the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it then Yeshua the prophet, it's always important understanding the feasts, or then the Moadim, or then the rehearsals, because with it we understand the times then the YHWH has set for his people when they are obedient, and then they can receive understandings from the Holy Torah. So then, as far as what's going on during these times, we can simply make a relation of what then his people are going through, while then these holy prophecies are set then for this specific time and the season. So then many translations have been made throughout the generations, and these seasons of Moadim, those then related in Vayikra, known as Leviticus. We then read in the 23rd chapter sections of it, and obviously the Holy Torah was then recorded in Hebrew and then later was translated. So then, as far as the New Testament, it's very important people understand the life and also the facets, or then the functions of YHWH. So then let's start with a section of the Holy Instructions related firstly with Ezekiel, the 18th chapter. The prophet obviously is speaking with his people, and YHWH has given him understanding as far as what the people should obviously expect from the hand of himself as then the righteous force that ever existed. Obviously Ezekiel is explaining because the people, they are in exile. The reason why, it's because of Shemitah, or then the holy instruction related with the rest of the land as per instructions was never obeyed. So during the time that the nation owned the land, unfortunately they did not maintain the 7th year as a rest for the land. And because people knowingly were disobedient, then the YHWH decided to let other forces take over, and then the nation was in exile in Babylon for roughly 70 years. But let's then understand why then they were in exile, and what is then Ezekiel is speaking of. Because the Hebrew language, it's not only the learning of the language it's going to give you understanding, but it's your walk before YHWH and how clean you are before the presence of YHWH. So let's then evaluate our own lives and understand one thing very important is every time there is sin in somebody's life, the only way out of it is via then the law. So you can't only have the law or ordinances or understanding Hebrew if you do not have love, understanding, or then step out to someone else's shoes. There are some very dirty traditions. There are some disobedience found even though the instructions are very clear. As we understand from Numbers, for instance, and also in Vaikra, you find then the Holy Shabbat depends on a couple of situations. One of them is the counting of days, and the second is the lunar view of every month. So if people want to walk cleanly before YHWH, they must understand the holy instructions as for what they are, not from what they wish them to be. So then, there was a time where Daniel, a contemporary of Ezekiel, while in exile, Daniel lived roughly 500 years before the coming of the last great prophet, and Ezekiel, also his contemporary. You find then that the people, they were pondering why this sin was so great. Why were they in exile? They thought YHWH would give them a slack as far as his holy instructions. No, he didn't. What he said remains. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant. So then, as far as Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, what does he say? Because the people, they were asking, how come then YHWH is not taking away this heavy situation out of their lives? Because you must understand one situation. When you have sin in your life, you can name it in any kind you can think of. Either if it's a pornography, or junk, or dirty relationships, or any kind of situation. If you have any of these found in the holy instructions, obviously you're not going to understand the holy instructions for what they are. So then, YHWH is showing then Ezekiel very precisely, the child won't be punished for the parent's sins, and the parent won't be punished because of the sins of the children. This is extremely important because not only we understand that no person can pay for the sin of the other, so then later on in the New Testament we began cleaning up, because a lot of people believe YHWH came to pay for the sins of the other. So let's make sure we understand who is doing the talking and what does it mean, Yeshua. Yeshua is not a name. Yeshua is not a person. Yeshua is a function. So when people, they do not have the understanding of love and instructions, then they get these situations mixed up. People have problem with the responsibility. They always trying to project their own crap on others. This means sin. YHWH did not come in his holy function of Yeshua giving people license to sin. Because Ezekiel extremely clearly, he said, no person can pay for the sins of the other. Now, when the people received the translation from the Hebrew into the Greco-Roman, what did they do? They went against the Holy Torah. They named Yeshua as a person when it's not. It is a function of Yod He Vav He. Now, were they learned? Absolutely. They copied the scientific world of the Hebrews and they made it for themselves. There were many great mathematicians, understandable, Archimedes, and many others. And they went so far as making themselves a savior of their own. And then, rather than understanding the function is not a person that's gonna go against Yod He Vav He himself. That's where people get their minds truly screwed up, because they simply do not understand the basics of Hebrew and the ordinances, and understanding the love that the holy Yod He Vav He has for His Word. Because it's only when we make a decision of reading and learning and understanding His holy instructions, then He extends the love from the instructions in our lives. Now, if we try to learn Hebrew to manipulate other people in any form or fashion, then a person is labeled cold, law-driven, and rather than becoming a beacon of love, becomes a beacon of an infernal situation. Because traditions, they were set up for a reason. Understandably, there is a time of a restoration where then traditions, they do not count. What does count is what Yod He Vav He has recorded. One of them is the Shabbat. The first sliver of the lunar view is then the Shabbat. This month that we are at, July of the Gregorian calendar, or the 4th Hebrew month, is on Tuesday, because the first sliver of the lunar view was observed on Tuesday. Thus the Shabbat. Now, if you read Daniel, it states then the sacrifices and ceremonies would be put on hold for a time. And if you read in Hebrew, you're going to find what was put aside for a time was the Shabbat. Now, if people, they have believed that a function came to save them and then gave his life in order to sin against the person behind it, it doesn't make absolutely no sense. Because it was not a person that died for the sin of the other. We are talking of a function, not a person. The person is Yod He Vav He, and he reflected his persona upon Ben Yosef. Now, if you don't understand Hebrew, your mind go vague. Who is then Mashiach ben Yosef? Who was then Yehoshua? The function of Yeshua is in the names of many of those that Yod He Vav He has chosen in order for the people to become acquainted with His holy instructions. So then, what else then we find in Daniel? What else we find then in Psalms? Psalm 49:7, no one can pay for the life of another. He's saying precisely what in Ezekiel he's saying. So YHWH has said very precisely, if you sin, if you are dirty, if you have dirty relationships, if you're watching something that you know that you shouldn't, then you become a cold person when it comes to understanding of His holy instructions. So no person can pay for the sin of the other. The force that said this was YHWH in His function of Yeshua. It's not a person, it's a function. Now, until people understand that people washing themselves with some sort of person that can wash away their sins, it is absolutely pagan. Traditions are fine, but we are on the another side of the situation where those traditions, they must die and being replaced with the holy instructions as for what they are. And sometimes it's not easy because it takes some time. Shabbat this month is on Tuesday. Saturday is a regular day of work. Some months you find then, by coincidence, then the first sliver of the lunar view can be on Saturday. Then you can maintain the Shabbat on this day. That's why YHWH in His absolute infinite wisdom decided not to make a day as a standard for the others. He's very smart. So then our traditions simply must go. And then we read the holy instructions. We enjoy reading the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. But then we must be obedient. So then, is this Mashiach of theirs a person is going to pay for the sins of the others? No. He never did. Now, what can we understand as far as the functions? Oh, there are many. Av, for instance. You have Gibor, Jireh. So then, salvation is coming from the Greco-Romans or from the Jews? Does not the New Testament states very plainly? The salvation comes from the Jews because Yehuda comes the tribe that was then the tribe that maintained the records of the holy instructions. That's where salvation is coming from. So then, sometimes people think, what is going to be, if churches, they begin to become aware of it? What is going to be the lives of the pastors? I have to go out and get a job like anybody else. Because what they are teaching is a plain lie. As Shaliach Shaul, known as Paul, said at the end of times they're going to concoct theories based on the itching ears of their own. Because Shaul knew, or Paul knew, that these people, they want a Savior to pay for something that a Savior can pay for it. It's in Ezekiel and also in Psalms. So the best way is learning Hebrew, being humble, understanding when people are wrong, and then learning the language. But it must be done in love for what they are. You are not obligated to do what's there, but truly you are obligated to try and learn His holy instructions. So then, how many times have you gone to church and sometimes the pastors, they go up front, stand up, posing themselves, and they read their own copy, Greco-Roman copy, not Hebrew. Their own invented copy of the Word. And honestly, when the 70 elders from the Hellenistic Hebrew mixing, when they finished the Septuagint, they themselves say, you know what, this is a piece of crap. That's what they say, in other words. It's extremely unholy. But since they were under the gun from the government, what else could they have done? They came up with a piece of crap and people began to read. So, they go up front. How many times they have said, oh, then the nation of Israel was in a desert for 40 years. That's a lie. They were never there for 40 years wandering in a desert. Don't be stupid. Read the scripture in Hebrew. It's going to give you step-by-step formation and what they did and what not. Second, when they left the medium after receiving the holy instructions, then there were some sort of rebels around, and then the earth had opened up and people went into the hole. There was no such phenomenon. That's another stupidity from these ignorant pastors. Hor simply means whole. He was the person in charge of the army under Moses, and his name was Hor. So they fell in the hands of the whole. Now people, they go to church, they waste their time, and they pay those holy scoundrels, and they hear this crap. People have liberties to make any choices they want. But salvation does not come from the Greco-Romans. Salvation comes from the Jews. Not because they themselves are the bringers of salvation, but because of what they have kept. They have kept the Holy Torah for centuries. So the Torah is the salvation. And one of the functions is Yeshua. He came to teach the Torah in love, so then we can understand how to become saved. Understanding the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Revelation is truly Shafat Yeshua. Now comes the standard, the basics of the basics. Shafat is one thing, Yeshua is another thing. Now they have taken the person of Yeshua and turning him into a Shafat, judge. How can we do that? Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has said himself in his function of Shafat the vengeance is His and His alone. So YHWH is not sending anybody with Yeshua in human form to take the place of Shafat or judge. You have to be really stupid not to have this understanding so simple from Hebrew. Of course, we give us slack because people are ignorant and they were brought up with instructions that are not valid. So who has placed then the function of Yeshua as a judge in Revelation? It was then those people who are named the fathers of the church. They made it up. There is no Yeshua in the function of Shafat. So then, next time we're going to evaluate more the situation, because it is important understanding the functions of YHWH. He is the force behind it. And He never sent anybody to pay for the sins of the others. Next time we're going to evaluate these more based from the New Testament, because truly in Hebrew there is no New Testament. That's another situation, because the wine of perdition is the holy instructions twisted. For instance, when you understand Ezekiel 18 and also Psalm 49, it states very plainly no person can pay for the sin of the other, and you come up with ideas where people can get released from their sin by having other person pay for it. That's being drunk. That's the wine of perdition. Next time I'm going to evaluate these more. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.